Recently, there was a discussion about the Vagabond RPG I read on a social media community. I think it was Reddit because, of course it was. Anywho, there was the usual discussion you see in any RPG community of, hey, I was thinking of trying out this system and I wonder if it would be right for me. Vagabond does a bang-up job and is very well designed with a creator that is constantly seeking to make it better. Nevertheless, I had some good things to say about it, but I did also give pros and cons for the system. After all, no system is perfect for every type of game. Vagabond knows what it is. It's not trying to please everybody. It's a combat-focused action RPG with high fantasy characters similar to but slightly more held back than the power scaling of something like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, where the characters are basically fantasy superheroes. But that's where the conversation took a turn. A couple people piped in saying, people keep telling me this is rules light, but after a quick glance, it doesn't seem like it's rules light at all. So I prefer games like Shadowdark or Dragonbane. And that got me thinking, what makes a rules light RPG, and is Vagabond a rules light game specifically? So first, let's tackle what rules light actually means. As is true with any community definition, there's no true ultimate definition of what it is, but I tend to take it as any system where the core rules of the game are easy enough for anyone to remember without constantly having to refer to the book and can fit on a relatively small number of pages. And note, I say core rules because even games like Morkborg or Fate, both of which are considered very rules light, have numerous expansions, content, character choices, and optional rules. Things that have expanded the game in a multitude of ways, and yet we still consider those rules light. This is why, despite people telling me, oh, you must like Cypher because it's rules light, I often have to let them know that my current favorite system is not rules light. Cypher has a lot of core options under the hood depending on your campaign. It's a large genre agnostic toolkit rather than just a single game, with a lot of little things in the rules that you can use in one way or another. So I put Cypher somewhere in the middle between rules light and crunchy, but that's actually where I kind of like to play personally. This is all what I just consider rules light, but I would love to see what you think down in the comments below. Do you think I'm on the mark? Do you think I'm completely wrong? What's your definition of the term for rules light? Okay, so now that I've defined what I think is generally accepted as rules light, does Vagabond fit that bill? First, before we get into the content of the book, let's look at the book itself. The book is 200 pages long, but it's only a 6x9 format size, with much of the book having a font size of, I think it's like 10 or 11. Compared to most RPG books you likely own, which are US letter size, aka 8.5x11, with fonts closer to like 9 or sometimes even 8. If Vagabond was printed using these specs, I bet the book would easily be under 80 pages in total, maybe less. It's not as tiny as Morkborg, but I believe it's smaller than Shadowdark, and it's certainly smaller than some other rules light RPGs like Crown and Skull, which is another amazing RPG I want to talk more about, by the way, but another video. And what about the contents? Well, of those 200 pages, the bestiary and dependencies take up basically half the book, which means the actual rules for the game are just over 100 pages, which would probably be closer to about 40 pages in a regularly formatted rulebook. And I mean, that's the entire system. Rules, character creation, spellcasting, equipment, everything. Okay, alright, but in my definition, we're not talking about character options here. Even rules light systems can have content expansions. So what about the core rules of Vagabond? How beefy are they? Well, the core rules of the game are on 11 pages. One of those pages is a full-page piece of art, and some of those other pages have diagrams or half-page pieces of art. So really, we're talking closer to 7 or 8 pages. And remember the book and font size here. In a normal D&D style formatted rulebook, we're looking at 3 to 4 pages of text for the entire rules of the game. Now, We do have to add a few pages here for how monster stat blocks work and the freeform spellcasting system, which would bring it back up to, say, around 11 pages of rules within the book that you may need to keep track of that are not character specific. And converting the format size once again, that's a total of what, like 5 pages of rules in a normal sized rulebook total? Aside from some notes about movement rules, modifiers for conditions, and spellcasting, the bulk of Vagabond is really just, if you want to do a thing, roll 1d20 and compare it to the number that's already pre-written on your character sheet. If you meet or beat, then you succeed. That's it. You don't even need to have any back and forth with the GM to do it. It just happens. That is the vast majority of the system. Okay, so what about interactions with character options? Well, there's a base of 10 character levels for each class. And at 3, 5, 7, and 9, you get to choose one of the really easy to reference perks, many of which are just a passive boon of some kind. So the actual class abilities are only at level 1 and then the other leftover even levels, which means depending on the class, you really only have a handful of class abilities to keep track of. And there's a difficulty rating for each class to let you know exactly how simple or complex each is. Ones with spellcasting are going to take a little more writing than ones that aren't. So, looking at all of this, is Vagabond a rules light system? I'd say yes. The actual rules are really tiny. And hell, even if you want to argue that the character options are part of the rules system, if that's the case, then a lot of systems that people, probably like you, calls rules light probably should not be considered rules light any longer. Look at this. This is the size of the rule book. She's not thick. She's not big. She's streamlined down to just what you need to play the game. If you want to play something like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, both of which are quite crunchy systems when you think about it, but you want something light, more streamlined, or faster to play, I think you only have a couple of really good options right now. Nimble and Vagabond, both of which are amazingly written, are probably some of those options. I don't mention Shadowdark, a game that I basically gave a perfect score to in my review, because Shadowdark is not trying to mirror the modern style of game from D&D or Pathfinder. It's going for a more older classic RPG vibe. But if you want modern D&D or Pathfinder but streamlined, then Vagabond is a great choice, and my second suggestion right now probably being Nimble, which gives you the same thing but in a slightly different setup. So hopefully that gets the word vomit out of my head regarding this topic. What is a rules light RPG, and is Vagabond one? I would love to know more about what you think about this in the comments. Do you agree? Do you have another hot take? Okay. Time for the YouTuber thing. Feel free to close the window if you don't want to hear it. If you like what I do, like and subscribe and all that jazz, and maybe give a visit to my Ko-fi page. Although my work doing layout and design for RPGs is getting hotter and hotter all the time, it's still not always quite enough to pay all the bills. If you have it, a couple of bucks for this Canuck for some brewskis would be greatly appreciated, especially with the new changes I'll be making this year. Except for my Void Home books, which are sold separately. All other content I make and sell on places like DriveThruRPG are going to start to be made available at a fraction of the normal prices on my Ko-fi to anyone that's a monthly supporter. That's going to be books, art, assets, and more. You should see a drop of a bunch of these things sometime in January. Okay, thanks for coming to listen to my little rant, and as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one, eh?